at that with Steve, and I let Ken know we might meet with the Home Builders Association to just go over some of their concerns. End goal being is if there's any projects that need to drop out of that with Steve, and I let Ken know we might meet with the Home Builders Association.
It'll catch up, hang on.
Okay. And if any projects need to drop out of there, we can drop those out before we get to the actual adoption, and I'll communicate with Mike on what those changes are, because he's not actually going to be able to make it to that meeting. I think he said, okay. And so we're going to be in communication with him the whole way through, so that the final product that comes to you has been vetted again. The one thing that I wanted to point out is that the elephant in the room on the SDCs is not really an individual pipe project, it's the water treatment plant. It's the cost of doing the water treatment plant. That's the big nugget, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go along. Do you have the PowerPoint?
Okay, now if you can give me just a second.
Sure.
You have to maximize the window to see it, I think.
Yeah, but I also then need to be able to screen share.
Yeah,
I think the little
you
plants
have to
do.
maximize
There it
to
is.
see the screen. There you go.
But I need to screen share, so I need to. Sorry.
No, it's hard to do if you don't have two screens.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on. She's trying to do this with one screen, and normally we have two screens, so you can operate both.
It was really fun trying to do payments last night at 1 a.m. at SeaTac because I couldn't sleep, and trying to do it without having two screens. while we
screens.
bounce back and forth. So
Yes.
How do you minimize this one?
It's, you have to escape out of that.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, escape. There we go.
It should be on
But it's, no, it's not on
your
here.
Zoom.
How is Excel now popping up?
So go to your Zoom.
Yeah, it's over here.
Okay. And then you should be able to share screen.
Replace my
And then-
laptop or my desktop from one this size to
There you
one
go.
this size. And I'm still
And then
split
that's
this one,
shared.
so now I think three. That's what we got.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm getting my thing.
There you go.
Rock and roll.
Okay, and then
Okay.
now I should be able to, like this. Here we go.
There you go. Cool.
Nice job, Karen.
Okay.
Yes, it's much harder.
So go ahead and go to the next slide for me, Karen.
Okay. Find my mouse, there we go.
So the agenda tonight, we're gonna be doing a little tag teaming between me, Steve, and Kenna. I'll be doing the definitions of the SDC options. Steve and Kenna are gonna talk about the fiscal policy implications of the SDC options. I'll go over the single-family SDC by option and the neighboring communities, SDCs now. And then we'll also be doing the conclusion and ask for your direction on which way policy-wise we want to go with this. Next slide, Karen. So we have three options available from a policy standpoint. You can do the full freight, which is no cuts or discounts for the currently adopted SDCs. You can do option B, which is for water ratepayers pay for upsizing of existing lines, which would also include transportation, reducing transportation SDCs to only collect enough SDCs so that we have a 20% match for going after state and federal funding on eligible projects. You can also, as part of option B, lower parks SDCs to try to collect enough to get the 40% match to get state like OPRD, Oregon Parks and Rec District, grant money. Because of the size of our city, we have to have at least a 40% match. So one of the things we looked at is, in order to reduce down from the full freight, you can do a little bit of trimming in water, some significant trimming in transportation and parks to try to find a balance. So you lower some while the other gets raised up to try to keep that overall cost down. Option C is same thing for water ratepayers, but for transportation, it assumes that we're going to be able to get match money from some other agency. So instead of us coming up with a 20% match through SDCs, we actually are able to get that as a grant and use it as a match towards federal money. It has been done before.
Yes, but it was pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Yes.
Right, and there are only so many rabbits.
It's very difficult, and you're 100% at the whim of whether or not federal money and the grant money is going to be there. And then parks, same kind of deal, is we're leveraging other people's money to make up our 40% to try to get the OPRD grant for parks. The thing about option B that I also wanted to note is these are all competitive. So we have to slug it out with other agencies to try to get what little money is available each funding cycle. Option C, it's difficult. It's timing sensitive, so that the grants might not always align. You have to have this money in order to get this money. Well, if this isn't available and this cycle comes through, you've lost your opportunity. So they can be out of sync with each other. And option C is the least likely out of any of them to get any funding. It's roll the dice and hope for a miracle, basically. Next one. Finding the SBC option.
Yeah, this is my slide, and Gerald laid out the options and cleverly color-coded here. But what we want to talk about is, what's the dollars we're talking about here? In the option A, we're talking about how much money is in the SDC eligible. Think about the system development charge as a ratio. It's the growth-related costs of future projects divided by growth units, either meters or EDUs or something, that comes up with the rate, right? So that's the SDC. So what we're talking about here is the numerator in the SDC calculation. Think about water here. I'm just going to give you that water. You see $46.7 million is the SDC eligible. But if we peel that back, the total water capital improvement plan for 20 years is $116 million. I'm sorry, not 116 million, it's $106 million. So out of that 46 million, so roughly 44% of your total future capital improvement plan for water is now designated as SDC eligible. That means 55% or 56% is going to be paid by ratepayers already. So if we want to reduce that number more, we're going to push more money on the ratepayers' shoulders. Think about these just buckets of money that we're doing here. And like you said, I don't know how many times, the costs don't go away. If somebody doesn't pay it over here, somebody over here has to pay it. So I just wanted to frame that. And as you can see, option A, between water, streets, and parks, there's a total of 116 million, that numerator figure. If we go to option B, and Gerald said, we trim and we cut some things back. In other words, we take numbers away from the SDC calculation, but we got to get it from somewhere else. So that means somebody else is going to pay for it, or we're going to have to defer projects. And that drops it down to 65.8 million, or a difference of 50 million we're taking out of that numerator. That's got to be paid from somebody else. And option C, which is the lowest that you're going to get on the SDC, we're taking that numerator down to $45 million. Relative to what option A is, we're taking 71 million bucks out of the SDC bucket, and we're going to either get it from ratepayers or taxpayers, or we're not gonna do the projects. So that's the level of dollars we're talking about. We're gonna equate this back to the single-family residential home in a minute. But I just wanted you to see the scale of the numbers that we're talking about here under these options. The next slide, Karen, is gonna be taken on by Kenna, and this is the policy implementation.
Right. So, you know, we've talked about just straight up policy versus operations, right? I'm going a little off script, you guys, so just ignore me. And you handle policy, and I know I sat in council and said, counselor, that's operations, that's me, not you. This is all you. This is a decision that you have to make as the policy makers. Who's going to pay for the required infrastructure, right? As we expand and build capacity, who's going to pay for that? It's a policy decision. So when you look at the slide, Steve did a great job. You got a minus and you got a plus. Option A, you know, it's 5 SDCs, right? And there are discussions back and forth about how high should SDC be, what does it do to housing costs, what does it do for developers. On the other side is the full cost recovery from growth. Our ratepayers aren't stuck with paying that extra amount that Steve was talking about, right? We're trying to parse it out as fairly as we can. Those are the policy parameters that you're looking at on option A. On option B, the ratepayers, taxpayers are going to subsidize more the new housing coming in, the new capacity building, and we're going to reduce those SDCs down. So the developers are going to be paying less. How that affects housing and building, again, that's something you have to think about as policy makers. The final option, option C, the word aggressively is perfect, because what we've done is we have aggressively dropped it down, and we are aggressively looking at ratepayers and taxpayers subsidizing the growth and all of the projects, right? So if you reduce that all the way down, you're changing who's paying for it. Again, a policy decision. On the other hand, the SDCs go down the most. So as you're going through and thinking about this, you need to think about who needs to pay for it, what it's going to do for housing. And I have a couple anecdotes that have come up in the last couple of meetings. Mayor and I were at an LOC board of directors meeting. And they talked about, I believe it was Madras. And in Madras, they reduced their SDCs for certain homes in certain ranges. So affordable, not capital A affordable, but small A affordable. And they said, if you build affordable homes, we're going to reduce the SDCs down. And they didn't have people jumping at it. In fact, they had more people building regular single-family homes and paying the higher SDCs because they could continue to make a profit. And then I think Gerald was telling me 2011 and 2012, and was it Malala, where they reduced the SDCs to 0?
Yeah, and they got nothing. There was no building permits. They tried to reduce it or take SDCs off the table, which is, again, a policy decision.
Yes.
Because council can charge the full amount down to 0. Can't go higher than that. But as you can charge anywhere in that in between. And they were trying to spur on some development after financial crashes that were happening. So they just zeroed them out, and I think they did it for a year. They got nothing through the door, even with the reduction in SDCs to 0.
And there was production before that, though.
Well, before the crash.
It was before the crash.
Before the crash,
Yeah.
yeah. And these are anecdotal, right? We're just hearing from other cities. So again, that you have to take all of that information and make that policy decision.
The home builders are going to build what they can sell, so they're kind of like the Madras thing. If the people that were buying there or moving there and buying there, if they didn't want these other ones, that's not something that they could market. But they could market the other ones, because those are the ones that people were buying and selling. So even though you entice them to build these other ones, if they don't have a buyer, they're not gonna build it. That's why you don't see a whole slew of affordable housing out there. It's because it's not in the market of where people wanting to buy these houses.
Right.
So,
And we'll be discussing a little later on, we'll be discussing a little bit of correlation, or not correlation actually, between SDCs and the median cost of homes in different cities. That's a little later. So you will get that information as well. Gentlemen, did I miss anything?
No, you got it. Next slide.
so here's the single family breakdown for option. It's not gonna be a happy spot.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
So on the left, this is the one I want you to focus on for right now, okay? It's the existing single-family home cost prior to doing any SDC increases. So the water SDCs were developed in 1998, 25 years ago, okay? They were updated in 2004. They updated the water master plan in 2007, and then we just updated the water master plan in 2023. Even though they did the updates and the updated master plan, they didn't update the SDCs. They hadn't increased the SDCs to align with the other documents that they put forward. So when they did the master plan in 2007, they didn't raise the SDCs. So what happens, we use a grocery store analogy.
Yeah.
The price of an apple at 1998, and the grocery store doesn't change that price until 2024, and then they say, we can't do this anymore, we've got to do our cost recovery, and we have to charge the actual rate for the apple. It's gonna go like this, right? Okay, so you haven't done anything, you haven't made your incremental increases for inflation or projects or anything else. You're coasting along here until you do the master plan and you do the SDC update that is aligned with the master plan, and guess what happens? Boom, same thing. So this never happened, and that's why you're seeing this dramatic jump in SDCs. And what it does is it creates a gap because the SDCs did not keep up with the master plans and the growth of all of these people coming into the community. They put a strain on the system, okay? We've got to supply the water, we have to treat the water, we have to store the water, we have to distribute the water, okay? If there was no growth whatsoever, if we could say, guess what, we don't need to grow into our urban growth boundaries, we're just gonna stop, we're gonna keep the population the same. With Polk Well 4, I have enough water to supply everybody with everything, assuming no growth, no new businesses, no new industry, no new commercial, no new residential. We're good, we're solid. But because of growth, we're slated in the master plan to have a deficit, even with Polk Well 4, in 2028.
Explain deficit.
So the amount we consume with all of the additional people we're adding and businesses and stuff, the amount we consume, we can't produce enough from our wells, treat enough, store enough, and distribute it. Okay? That's where we're crossing the line, where we are consuming more than we can create. Which is the reason in the master plan that we have to do the treatment plant, the big pipe upsizes, doing all the circulation, the additional reservoirs to supply that 20-year demand that the master plan says we're gonna have. Because right now we're just a hair over 10,000, we're headed to 17 in that 20-year period. And depending on the growth, depending on how much people love living in independence, but they don't love living in other places, is going to determine how fast that happens. It can be very steady over the 20 years, or it could go boom. No, I didn't grow up here, I haven't lived here. Have you seen some growth booms in the past? Significant? That's what happens. If you don't have the money in place, if you don't create the supply and the reservoirs and the treatment plants that you need, you have deficits. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create that supply, so when the demand comes, we're not behind the 8 ball. We're not playing catch up. We don't have a traffic jam at an intersection, because guess what? Put a signal in right before we needed it, and everything works. Same idea with water. When everybody turns on the tap, it's there for them.
Do you think we're gonna have, sooner than 2028, we're gonna have issues with water supply? Maybe in the summer or,
We already have problems.
okay, so,
I have 2 pumps up at the North Water Treatment Plant. We burned those pumps up because we're pushing so much water through the north end that we've chewed up those brass impellers. We're buying stainless steel in the interim, hopefully to last longer, so that we don't have to keep doing these replacements. Because the last thing I want to do is have both pumps go down on our North Treatment Plant when we're at the peak of summer. We're also doing cleaning and rehab at the South Bowfield to try to keep its yield up as much as possible. But it used to kind of be balanced, but we've grown so much that it's sucking the south end dry, and it's sucking so much from the north end that we're having a hard time pumping it into the system, which is why 2028, boom, breaks.
Ken, I have a question for you. How could you tie this in to the housing issues statewide? Because there are some demands for building it, that all cities are supposed to have more housing, and it's not really an option.
We
And
don't have a choice. We can't say no, go away.
right, and there's some dinging that can happen.
Yeah, so legislatively, I mean, we have a new governor and new legislation, and the huge push is to build more houses, right? I mean, we have a homelessness crisis or an unhoused crisis. And there are many, we can go down a rabbit hole on that, but one of the theories is the best way to get people in houses is to build houses, right? The more houses we build, the more houses there are for people. And this, the legislature and the governor have made it very clear to cities that we must build a certain number of houses within a certain time frame. And if we do not, one of the ramifications is that the state could actually take over our planning department and enforce the issue. We certainly don't want that. But, so we can't just stop building. We can't just stop building and say we don't have enough water. Now, you've probably heard of a moratorium. You can do a moratorium for a short period of time, but only a short period of time. And you cannot use that to stop building. So we kind of have our back up against a wall with this pressure to continue to build so there are more houses so that we can continue to comply with all of the mandates that are coming down while our wells are being utilized at a level that they were never intended to be utilized. I think we've gone through 2 pumps in the time I've been here.
Yeah.
Or 3, 2 or 3 at least, but at least 2 in a year and a half. And those are what, 20-year pumps usually?
If they're operated under normal conditions, you can get 10, 15
There we
years
go.
out of the pump impellers. You might have to rewind the electrical motors on them. The more you use them, it's like driving your car. How long does it last if you drive at the speed limit or under, or how long does it last if you're driving at 100 miles an hour?
So Councilor Corey, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm gonna explain this to people. Did this issue come to city council previously and council said no, or is this something that we just haven't had conversations about since 1998?
So, well, I don't know what
As far as the SDCs go, I don't know the history of why why they did SDCs the way they did. It looks like it was to continue to make it palatable for growth. But I can't find any documentation to prove that. That's
Isn't that a
just
question
from
for Sean?
assumption. Huh?
Isn't that a question for Sean? He dictated those.
Public Works Director probably would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been, Mike Danko.
When I built my house, I worked with Sean and he told me how much my CPCs would be,
Yeah,
or my system would be.
and when I got here, the building official was calculating SDCs. But they were brought forward by Mike Danko, who was a community development director back then, and he didn't have a.
He
public
fills a
works
couple
director.
of roles.
Yeah, he wore a few
He's
hats,
deceased.
so.
Can you give us the numbers on how many houses need to be built in how many years, or what, you know, like what the number is?
I can't remember, Counselor, but I'll send it to you.
I think it's 36,000 statewide.
Well, I was gonna say 36,000
36,000 statewide.
I just don't remember what that affects.
Some fraction of that, I don't know what.
Do
how to
we have
calculate.
any credit built up for houses
Oh, no.
already built, or?
And that's 36,000, if I recall, isn't that annually?
Yes,
Yeah.
That's 36,000 statewide annually.
yes,
No issues
keep up.
because our infrastructure is
absolutely not.
working.
Every other city is having, they're
So
doing.
we talked about the numerator. What does the denominator have to be to make these numbers work?
So, what we just talked about was getting over to here. Okay, and then the previous slides, I want to focus on, so this one is your water, this one is your transportation, and this one's your parks. Okay, so in the first one, we said full freight. No changes, okay? The next one, we reduced water down. We transfer some of that, the requirements over to the ratepayers, okay? For the water line improvements for capacity.
Do you have a number, like what that looks like per household? Like an estimate or?
No, because I can't calculate the rates until the SBCs are done.
Okay.
Because it's, remember that, what Steve was talking about, it's a zero-sum game. If it costs $100 and SDC is $60 of it, it's $40 for the ratepayer. But if you lower the SDC's $40, it's now $60 for the ratepayer. We don't know until the SDCs shake out.
But we also don't know what the SDCs are gonna be because we only have master plans on transportation
Sewer,
and sewer
now water.
So our
Right.
park master plan is not complete yet.
no, it's, that parks and stormwater is starting this year.
Right,
And
so
they'll
this
probably
number
take about
is
a year
still
and a
not
half to
even
get through.
accurate because we haven't.
Good catch.
We're updating.
You're right.
It's for right now, right? It's the
Right now.
picture right now so that we can move forward with water. Because remember, we have to think about these as systems, separate systems.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that we're trying to say option A, like, just option A is what we're going for a 52,000 SDC, but that's not really what it is because we haven't finished 3 of the master plans.
No, and I think I've talked about this before. Every time you get done with a master plan, you finish the high priority projects, that's years 1 through 5. And then you have to redo your master plan to see if the next 5 years are now split up, become your high priority projects. So this is a recurring thing. It just keeps happening. And like I said, if you don't have any growth, there's some times where cities don't update their master plans because they don't have any need to. But if you're continuing to grow, you have to update those master plans regularly, and those SDCs go up along with it because of the cost of construction, the cost of projects. When you grow a city, it gets more and more and more
I totally
expensive.
get that. But I'm just saying, if a developer is gonna come and want to develop an independence, they're gonna look at this number, but this is truly not reflective of the next 3-year
It
period.
is the number now.
Now.
And if they get their plans in now, that's the number, whichever one it is, they
Yeah.
pay.
And-
But if
and
they
the-
come in 2 years, you may have adjusted it, so it's a different number. So you look at, it's a picture in time, and it's when they get their plans in. So when a developer comes tomorrow and says, I'm gonna build a house, or, well, when these are enacted,
I had one today. She sent me an email a couple days ago asking about a development and asked me, because she's trying to get her funding package. And I just sent to her today, if you do this development, this is what you're looking at as far as SDCs, if The building plans came in today.
Right.
That means the infrastructure's already done. I can't tell her what it's gonna be down the road, but I also did let her know that the water SDCs were probably gonna go up quite a bit. But it's just a snapshot in time that we try to give them an estimate of what it is right now. That's the best we can do.
And it doesn't change unilaterally, so once they get the plans in, if you changed it it's after the plans come in and are approved, right, Gerald? After the
No,
plans?
the date that the plans come in for review, that's when
It sets the SDC.
It sets the SDC
That
date.
sets the
It
clock.
sets the SDC.
The plans might not get to me for another 3 weeks or 2 months. I look at the date it came in and I pull the
It's like buying
SDCs
an
up.
interest rate at a bank.
So when they come in and they will get whatever it is, $35,000. And then they can build a year later and it's $35,000. But if they come in after the next one is enacted and say it's 2 years later and we've gone through that cycle and they have gone up to $37,000, then they'll pay 37 when that plan comes in. So it's not a surprise, right? It depends on when the plans come in.
I totally get it. I just wish, just can't do this. I wish we would have started charging more for the apple a long time ago.
We're playing catch up.
Yeah.
Right.
But
And we're not the
And
only ones.
I know you're gonna hate to hear me say this. You're not the only city
Yes.
that's doing this.
But we're gonna be the only city with SDCs around $60,000 a house.
There are gonna be cities, if you went with this option, there are gonna be cities that blow right by us.
And
So,
we've got a chart for that in a second. We'll
Yeah.
show you that in just a second.
Yeah.
So I wanna get back to this real quick. So we lower down the water, okay? And in scenario B and C, that's the same. Sewer's the same, storm's the same, we haven't done storm. Then, transportation, this is the one where we lower it down and we're only collecting what we need for our match for the federal. And the same thing on the parks. We're only collecting what we need for the match to get that other grant, okay? This one over here is, we're gonna use other people's money as much as possible. So this is where they are at right now, they're not changing. And parks, we're gonna use other people's money.
But that's,
So parks basically goes to zero because we're gonna try to leverage other people's money in order to keep this total cost for SDC down.
what we're doing is we're cutting off our own feet, because if we start only building parks to match a grant, we're not gonna build,
You're absolutely right.
That's
we're not gonna
correct.
build
You're
what we,
absolutely right.
what we need to
What's
build
gonna
to
happen
get
is
people to
nothing's
come
going to
here.
get built.
you're correct, Counselor.
You're absolutely right.
That's your policy decision.
And that's why this is, I mean, she said it right out of the box. This is the policy side, not an operations side. Can I hit the nail on the head? This is what do you want to do for your community?
That's why in SDCs, or ORS, we can't charge any higher than that max. But you have the ability, as a policy decision, if you want to lower it, not charge the max. And it could be for a multitude of reasons. But that's a policy decision that you have the power to do if you want to.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, how often can this be reviewed? Or are we limited to every X number of years?
No.
Or could we
No.
review
At the
it
pleasure of the
annually?
council.
Yep.
And I'll add, Counselor, if you remember, we just did transportation.
Yes,
But look, we're talking about transportation again within a year.
right.
So we can
Well,
look at it.
and it's just like your home budget. It's a package deal. You have to look at everything.
So this is
If-
her snapshot problem. Why isn't this all done at once? It's a snapshot in time, and yours point of, very well pointed out, you know, it's a package deal.
Now, my other question is all of this basically using the model of being a traditional single-family dwelling that will be building?
It's, in my entire career, that's the one that councils always want to see. Show me what it is for a single-family house. Because as far as sewer and water and parks go, because parks only gets charged residential, they don't get charged to commercial and industrial, okay? Transportation is the only one that is more difficult to calculate because it's based on trips, and each use generates different trips. So that's the one where I gotta go into my big table and figure out which one it is. For a single-family house, it's a 3/4 inch meter. For a duplex, one side is 3/4 inch, the other side is 3/4 inch. It's the same, it's unit. So when you look at the SDCs, it's on a per equivalent dwelling unit basis because they're very similar. Okay? Transportation is the wild wacky one that just bounces all over the place. The utility side, the water and the sewer are pretty linear. The bigger the meter size, like if it's for commercial, let's say you're using 1.5 inches, it's pretty linear. You're gonna get X number of houses, water flow through that 1.5 inch meter for that commercial.
And the beauty of that is we have engineered standards for that.
Yeah.
The American Water Works puts out engineered standards for meters. We know what devices do.
Right.
That's the beauty of that. And he's right about transportation. Transportation is trip generation by land use. It's observed, so everyone is different.
Karen, can you go on to the next one? Because we policy one to death.
Sorry.
Okay, so we took the normal ones that you see, but we also added in some other ones just for reference, okay? So Monmouth is down here, and I actually looked this up while I was gone. Monmouth's was 5-6 million.
Oh,
For their master
total 20-year capital improvement.
They're not including the water treatment plant because they have the same water right that we have that they have to perfect. They haven't updated their master plan yet. They're working on updating their master plan. So their number gonna go up.
So they're.
Are they using our water treatment?
We share.
No, I mean, the
They
new
have,
one.
they have their own separate system. They have their own well fields, their own treatment. We have a cross connection that if they need water or we need water, we can draw from,
And that's
but it's
current.
emergency use.
But I think, Counselor, you were asking about when we get the surface. So the surface water treatment plant is a regional concept, so we will build it for our use, leaving on-ramps for other agencies to connect in, and we will charge them for that. But we're doing this based upon us, not upon everybody.
Not upon anything that's recoverable from charging other groups for use.
Correct.
Right, because it doesn't matter what the other groups are doing. We have to do what we're doing.
Right.
Whether they join in and do plug and play and add more treatment trains into it, for me, it really doesn't matter. Because they're gonna pay for the cost of those improvements. It's not gonna be on ratepayers here.
Right. So those on-ramps I was talking about is, and I'm gonna throw numbers that are they're just numbers, right? If Monmouth wants to come in, like, let's say they choose not to come in now, but they wanna come in later, we're gonna charge them $2 million and you can plug and play and off you go. Now, that's a made-up number, but, right, we'll figure it out,
Whatever the infrastructure costs.
whatever the
to supply.
infrastructure costs.
So what will we do with that $2 million?
We will probably put it right back into our infrastructure.
Well, the money that's gonna be coming from them is to pay for the improvements that we built.
Okay, so just pass through.
So it doesn't reduce the SDCs retroactively
No,
in
no,
any way?
no.
No,
It
and that's
goes-
why I said, we don't care what the others are doing. They can join in, but they're kind of their own separate thing. We have to take care of ourselves,
Right.
and that's all we're focused on.
So this graph is showing we're the winners, we're the most expensive, but it doesn't take into account that all the other cities are gonna be raising their SDCs, and so there's gonna be a new graph in a period of a few months maybe,
Yeah, these
that will show different.
Correct.
Correct.
Guys, so
If they choose to. They don't choose to.
transportation,
Correct, that's a policy decision.
these guys could come back with $115 million, but again, okay, this is a policy decision. This line could go way over here and put them beyond us, but the council might decide not to choose the whole amount and bring it back. The master plan may say, this is what you gotta do. And if you don't charge the full SDCs and you can't get other funding for projects like federal funds or state funds to fund those projects because you're not covering the SDCs and you don't have local funds for it. If you can't pay for those projects, you don't build them. So if you have an intersection that's going to failure, or you have a water system that can't supply enough water because you don't have a way to pay for it, you send it to failure. And as far as running out of water, running out of sewer, those kind of things, that's a nasty word, it's called moratorium.
Yeah.
And once you do that, the state will tell you, you have 5 years?
I want to say it's 5 years, but don't quote me on that.
You have 5 years to fix it, and if you don't, they drop the hammer on you.
You have to have a plan in place and they
And
monitor you.
that's where we're headed if we don't fix this.
If we don't fix and keep up with, I'd like to say, the forced growth that we're required to maintain, and it's gotten even worse now that they're mandating, you have to build X number, okay? It's forced growth. So the question for you all from a policy decision is, who do you want to pay for it? Or what's the balance? Or what risk do you want to put in? Do I want to risk not being able to get some transportation projects built because there's either no funding or we didn't beat out the other people who went in for the funding? That's a risk. You might be the winner on all of them and get them over and over and over again, and there's no problem. But there's risk in that because you're competing with others. And if you don't get the money or the money's not there, you don't get a whole project.
And so you don't score as high if you don't have skin in the game when you're
Correct.
applying for grants.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
You have to have a match, you have to have, and honestly, you have to be doing things right? We've seen that. If we're not doing things right, then we don't get the points. Because the fact that we screwed up is actually going to drop us down in the granting. And so the fact that we're doing this, we're looking at this, we're doing everything we need to do, that's going to show the grantors that we actually know what we're doing, and we're going to continue to get grants. Now, it's not going to overcome match and the lack of match. I want to give you an example. Gerald said, if we don't have the money, we're not going to build it. Kind of. Because in a city that I was in before, we had a waste lift station failure, right? There's a building going on and the waste station went way over capacity and just basically quit working. $1.5 million, this was pre-COVID, $1.5 million. We talked about moratorium and the state basically said, we're not going to let you go into a moratorium. You need to get this done. We couldn't stop building. We couldn't not build the waste lift station because then there would be waste running down the streets. So you can't just not build it sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes you have to figure out where in the heck you're going to get $1.5 million.
The 9th Street pump station that's under construction right now, there were a couple of storms where it was running 24 hours a day and the guys were going out regularly to see if it was going to overflow in that street.
In reality, what happens in your case, because I was with you on that.
You were.
What's gonna happen is you get into a bind, you're in a corner. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna borrow money. You're gonna go take out a loan and you're gonna get that thing fixed. Well, those darn loans have to be paid back and they have something called bond covenants or pledges on them. And you're going to pledge your sewer rate revenues. So you just put a lien on the revenues of the sewer system to fix a problem that was an emergency. So that you will put your ratepayers as the backstop for those situations.
Right.
And I can count hundreds of situations that I've been involved in over the last 30 years where exactly that's happened. Where we didn't have the money, our SDCs were too low, we didn't collect, all of a sudden there's a burp in development. The ratepayer is always the backstop. And in some cases, the taxpayer even became, because they were such a lousy credit on the revenue side, the utility, they put a full faith and credit pledge against the taxpayer. And that's some of those are incredibly difficult because they got to go to the voters and then they went to litigate. So don't do that.
Well, I can just imagine the voters right now are looking at the situation and saying, okay, so we're gonna increase the SDCs and independents to this amount greater than what West Lynn And we either put it on the people who live here currently or people who are coming in and want to build. But people aren't going to come in and want to build a home here when Independence Elementary School is failing and Central High School is failing. And we have
Can't do
no
it in a
parks, we
vacuum.
have no water, we have no streets. We've put ourselves in this horrible situation, so they could go to West Lynn and get a school that's ranked 10 out of 10, or they could go to Independence and get a school that's 3 out of 10 and get a far less superior product. This is where we're at in 2024.
But we can't control the schools. I mean, your policy has to take into account the city.
I do have to look big picture, and as a parent, that's what I look at, big picture, as a citizen or someone who lives here in Independence. I have to look at the big picture. This is really tricky because I know we need the money to fix all these things that we failed to fix in the past, but I don't believe that raising the SDCs to this amount is going to provide the denominator we need to get the money. I'm not convinced.
So let me correct something. SDCs are not to fix things. SDCs are for capacity building.
Yeah.
So this is not to fix anything.
This is
This
not
is
a
just
replacement.
to build capacity, so.
But that's not true, because it has to fix things,
Nope.
because we are not, we are
That's why you
failing
have-
now.
Well, that's why we're gonna raise your water rates and your sewer
Right,
rates, and you're
because
gonna
we-
scream bloody murder at
We
us.
can't
on
do
that.
it now, so we are currently failing, and we cannot maintain status quo. What this fixes,
So we don't fix, they're not allowed, they're legally.
Expands.
They're restricted funds that
Yeah.
only can be used for capacity
Yes.
building.
Yeah, like
We
it
cannot
expands.
touch them.
What you're talking about, we went through with the sewer.
Yeah.
We did the sewer master plan,
Conversation
we
on
did
the
the
sewer.
sewer
I remember
SDCs.
that.
And once you set the sewer SDCs, then we set the sewer rates. The rates are set up to repair and replace the existing system. And I'll give you a perfect example, the one that's going on right now, it's out to bid, C Street sewer line. We are replacing that sewer line with the exact same size. SDCs can't pay for that. New people coming in don't pay for existing system things, okay? So that is being paid for 100% by the ratepayers. And the videos of that sewer line, it's old concrete that's broken. There's old vitrified clay, stuff was put in the 30s. There's all kinds of old stuff in there, and you can see the water leaking in. So the ratepayers have to pay for the replacement of that to seal up the pipe so we don't have the extra water in that's overloading our pump station and overloading our wastewater treatment plant. That's the obligation of the people who are here now. Replace your stuff as it needs to be done.
Which is one of the primary uses for the fees that are collected now.
Right.
Right.
ratepayers.
Maintenance
yes.
and upgrade as needed. This
So
could
they never
actually,
upgraded as needed, I mean.
So a long time ago, the federal government granted money to cities to build sewer systems and water systems. The caveat of that was, we're gonna give you the money to get this done, okay? Once it's done, you don't get any more money. It's your responsibility to put money away, so when that gets too old, you can replace it, okay?
We put it away in a capital
When
fund
you
or
buy a
reserve fund.
brand new car, how many people make their payment, their insurance payment, and then they put extra money away each month so that when that car is no good anymore, they can pay cash for it? I don't know if anybody that does that.
I do that, but it took me 45 years to get to that.
The same thing happens in infrastructure. It was built a long time ago with other people's money, but there was no plan in place to put money away so that you had cash on hand, pay cash for that, replace it, and then continue to put money away so you can replace it again in the future. It's the kick the can. We'll worry about it later because we have these things right now we have to worry about.
So SDCs are going to be, are paid though by developers and people coming in to do expansion.
Yes.
So by,
Correct.
Well,
So-
could be people in our area that actually want to buy a house. I mean, there are still.
They want to build
Build
a
a
house.
house,
Yeah.
build a house.
Right, but unfortunately, nobody can afford a house that currently lives here in our area. Like we're
I
getting a lot
can't
of
afford
people-
my own house if I
Well,
had to
and
go out
that's
and
a
Right.
nationwide.
That-
So we built this city up, not underground, but we've built it up with these pretty houses enticing people, and they didn't have to pay for it because we never raised the SDCs, and now,
And that's in the past, and there's nothing we can
oh
do
my
but go
gosh, I
forward.
know it's in the past, but it's like, this is where we are. This
Yes,
is
it is, and now we
So
have to go
I
forward.
want to circle back to the very beginning of what I said before we started the presentation. Home Builders Association brought up some issues with us. Steve and I and Kenna are gonna look at it again to see if there's any projects in there that actually shouldn't be SDC. And this number may end up coming back down. I don't know, I haven't looked at it yet because we just talked this afternoon. But I've already told them we're willing to go through line by line and look at those. And I talked to Steve about it a little while ago. Let's go back through line by line and make sure that we didn't add something in that wasn't supposed to be there. So we know this number is right when we bring it back to you. When we bring it back to you, this is kind of the end of this discussion. We need a policy direction on what am I bringing back to you? Am I bringing you back the full amount?
Karen, can we go to the prior slide?
Yeah, can we go back?
That would give the option A, B, and C, and the numbers that you, there you go, this is.
Here's where we're at right now. Are we gonna bring back this water, because these are all like this. Are we gonna bring back this water, which is the full amount? Are we gonna be bringing back to you a reduced one with a reduction in transportation parks 2? Are we bringing back this one with an even further reduction in transportation and zeroing out parks? This
That's
is
the
kind of
direction we need.
I'm looking for
That's the number.
what you all are thinking. Are you looking at this one? Are you looking at this one? Are you looking at this one? Because I don't want to bring a whole myriad of stuff to you, and I always have to put in there, even if we did bring back A, B, and C, there's also another one. Council can do what they want. They can pose their own and agree on something.
Are you gonna
But it
raise
can't be
water
more
rates no
than.
matter what?
Yeah.
So no matter what, water rates are going up, it's just how much are we doing? And
Yeah.
Correct,
Yeah, they
correct.
Yeah,
So I,
She's gonna be so mad at me.
to kind of get this conversation, because we're in a little bit of a time constraint tonight. I think for me, option C, where we're completely cutting out the category of our parks isn't feasible. Because I feel like it puts us at risk and we would be rolling the dice and being so lucky if we could get the things completely contingent on the grants. And
I
just-
think option C between you and me is
It's not started.
completely wishful thinking.
It's not started.
Okay, I do have a question about if the SDCs, if option A was selected and it becomes prohibitive to a builder to even build here because of the cost of SDCs and they avoid us and they go other places to build. What does that do to the required number of units that we need to add in a specific period of time? Does that make us in default somewhere else with the state?
The state does not, they're not at this time considering any factors. We are pushing back and requesting that they consider factors, like some places you can't build because of wetlands. Some places they have to do a UGB expansion and
Right.
it takes forever. Some places they don't have the infrastructure. We're requesting funding for infrastructure. So there's gonna be some legislative discussions going on.
Okay,
How that comes out, nobody knows. Nobody
Has
knows.
there been a breakdown of that 36,000 that says X percentages for the metropolitan counties and?
Fred will probably answer that. I don't know the
Yeah.
answer.
And of the
That's
36,000,
fluffy, I don't know.
Yeah. I
And-
mean, I
and-
know there's a push for rural housing too, but My sense is the need is greater in the metropolitan Katy.
And they're putting an incredible burden on the home builders. They're almost making the home builders now becoming
The villain.
the villain here, and it's not what they
So-
do.
Because
Is there any assistance because there are more ADUs being built? Do those count in the totals?
That's housing.
yeah,
Yeah,
Can we, and this goes back to kind of in the, earlier on, it sounds like we have the option to preserve or create categories for like incentivizing people to build an ADU or affordable housing, whether or not anyone takes us up on that as a way of helping to keep the costs down, maybe for some more affordable housing types.
Because right now, we do that.
Okay.
ADUs are required to connect to the existing home's water and sewer.
Yeah.
As long as they don't increase the meter size, there's no water charge, there's no sewer charge, there's no stormwater, because stormwater for a single-family lot is a set flat number. Okay, so if they put a garage in, an ADU above it, or they just do an ADU on the property, there's no water, sewer, or storm charges.
Because they're not utilizing.
Right.
There is a transportation charge
Sure.
because they're adding, and there's a parks charge.
Yeah.
But we're already cutting that out by design, by forcing them to connect to the house's system so that it doesn't trigger another water meter, and then we have to charge them for everything else.
I would hope that we could come up with some creative options for meeting some of the housing demands, or the housing goals that we've been given, through maybe ADUs. And I know that it would be, it's probably not feasible, I agree, for a private developer to come in to build single-family homes. There wouldn't be the demand, like you had kind of pointed out. There's a
Remember,
case studies that show.
these are smart folks, and they build to what the market wants.
Right, but could we eventually in the future have a relationship with a developer that is focused on affordable housing and I know there are some nonprofit.
So I know
models.
where you're going, Counselor,
Is there a way that
and
we can preserve?
we have been
housing?
trying to do that.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is when you hear about these affordable housing projects, I don't want to use projects, these affordable housing developments.
Yeah.
Usually the city owns the land. We don't own any land.
Yeah.
So one of my friends is the city manager in Dayton, and they own land. And they are moving forward with an affordable housing development because they own the land. They're putting out an RFP for a developer to come in and build affordable, because they can do that. We don't own the land. We have no land. I mean, we can give up our parks, but then parks.
This is all,
Sorry, we got off track. We got a rabbit hole.
I'm living down more rabbit holes. We're just gonna be building now builder-grade properties left and right all throughout the city, so the builders still make a profit and they still pay these SDCs. I don't see any other way besides going with option A. Parks are too important to eliminate. All these other categories are too important to eliminate. We have failing water, we have failing streets, we have failing sewers. We have to address these issues. There's no other option besides option A. But I don't believe that the market will support this. And so I think we will address this sooner than later, very, very soon, because I do not think option A will work. But I think it's the best option to focus on now to relieve some of the pain on the people who live here currently.
And if it doesn't support what we need it to support, we can relook it.
Agreed.
And I keep reminding Kenna, I don't build houses. Cities don't build houses. We're not in the house building business. Home builders and developers are in that business. And they have their own things that they have to deal with, the cost of land. Dealing with a property owner that thinks their land is worth $100 million. But they don't take into account, well, we have to clear it off, we have to put all this infrastructure in, we have to get it ready for houses, there's a cost associated with that. You're just selling a piece of ground. So they have to deal with the property owners, they have to deal with supply costs, they have to deal with costs of employing people to build the houses, keeping them and retaining them. So they have a daunting task too. Here's how much it costs for me to do X number of units. They still have to make a profit so that they can move on to the next one. On our side, we don't build houses. We build infrastructure, we maintain infrastructure, we try to provide the parts for all the new piece.
I'd be interested to see what, since 1998, how much money we had to put in to compensate for the fact that our SDCs were never reviewed between.
That's a tough
In this
one,
timeframe, I
boy,
mean-
that's a head scratcher, and,
I mean,
Clearly, it's a number.
Yeah, it's definitely a number, and I don't know that it would help the argument, but, you know, the fact of the matter is, we have had to compensate.
So what are your thoughts? Chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry? I haven't heard you.
Here's where we're at.
I'm at
Are you
A.
all saying no
No.
to this one?
No.
Okay.
Okay, well, at least that's good.
So-
So C is off the table, my group.
We're down to these, and remember, I'm gonna try to get this number down if there are things in there that need to be taken out. So, do you want one or the other? Or do you want both of these brought back
I
and
only
hash them
want
out
A.
in the meeting?
I only want A.
Okay, we got 2 for A. How
I'd
about,
like to see A and B both.
Okay,
I mean, I think where we're at, I agree with Council Wilson that I feel like we've backed ourselves into a corner that where option A is the most, will put us on a path forward where we need to be. And I do think that this chart, comparing the other neighborhood or the other cities, a year from now will look drastically different, and I don't think Independence will be at the top of the stack.
I agree with
I think
that.
everybody's playing catch up right now.
I always cringe, the engineer in me. What everybody else is charging has no bearing on what your costs are.
because they all have different,
It doesn't have a hill of beans to do with what you're
I
facing.
think a more illustrative example is, how many other city managers have you talked to who are looking at the rest of your SDC rates right now?
Every,
Ask Steve.
they get tattoos.
Everybody.
the only ones that
So,
aren't are on their way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
They're
thing.
on TikTok, I
So
got
this is
500
not
gigs to
just,
go.
this is a snapshot in time, but it's a fluid scale.
Oh, absolutely.
Then there's some cities like Kaiser that has no ability to expand
Right.
because they've,
Right.
they're, so. as
they're
you
definitely
know-
outlier.
No, no, but what I was using that is,
Okay.
so because of the example that was being
Yeah.
discussed,
So we have about,
I understand, is that, you know, people looking at different things, well, their SDCs are really old because they can't expand, and so that,
Right.
and that can skew
So it
it.
needs a little caveat
So,
next to it.
so
Yeah.
since people are saying what they're thinking,
Yeah.
I'm more in the A category here because development needs to pay for the, you know,
Yeah.
and if the development does not happen, then some of the need does
Goes
not
away
happen.
too.
You know, and
Great point.
it will self-regulate.
Yeah.
And,
And we're coming out of a housing boom too.
oh, and I'm gonna tell you, having listened to the governor and staff and what other cities, I mean, almost every other city is doing, how do we all do this? And that's a challenge, and, we didn't get to, there's some things that have been put upon us.
So,
which is why you're the policy. Counselor Job, I don't know that you've had the opportunity to weigh in on what you want us to bring back to you.
Yeah.
I actually think that Oregon as a whole is failing and has been for a long time, and that they're gonna come back on this housing requirement because the entire state can't handle it. I think it was an idea that sounded really good, like a lot of policy, and it's going to be changed so drastically that it will be like we're on a case-by-case basis per city, you know, because every city does look so different. So I think A is the only option that we have at this point, because Independence, if we're looking at Independence, we have to have sewer, we have to have water for the people that are currently here, and the normal influx, you know, that's standard, not like a huge boom or anything. We're still gonna have growth. You know, it will be slower, but
so I will bring this one back, but remember, there's this other one over here, between now and then, you can change your mind.
Well, I
Okay.
just would like to say though, because I know we only have seconds, is I've been very vocal and clear, I think for the last 3 years, that parks is something that's very, very important to me. And I think it's important to kids and families in this community. So if you're going to merge A and B, please be aware that I am going to fight to keep parks.
Yeah, I'm just gonna bring, just based on consensus, I'm just gonna bring this back, but I also have to put in there this option A. Option B would be or as council decides.
So let me ask you a question. Could you review, okay, we've had this meeting. When and what's moving
next?
forward? Yeah, what's,
Gerald?
February 20,
It's the second
We
meeting
got a
in
hard
February.
date. Got a hard date.
22nd meeting.
Second
The
meeting in
22nd
February.
that's fine,
22nd.
second meeting.
And that's where you're going to see
I
a
don't have my
resolution
phone.
coming, a staff report, and probably 2 resolutions coming up. How are you gonna go for that?
So it will be, under the resolution, it'll be to adopt the SD, and it'll be, if we have any changes, it'll be the updated SDC report tied together with the new SDC calculation. So it'll be in a package. It'll take care of the report. It's adopting the report, saying this is our methodology. We have to do that. And here's our SDCs going forward. Does that make sense? So you're doing it all in one package deal.
The 27th, February 27th.
Alrighty, so this was informative, thank you. If you come up with additional questions afterwards, talk to staff.
Email them to me and I will make sure they get where they need
She'll
to
do
go.
that. We're gonna take a break and we start at 6:30 upstairs, so Karen has a chance to set up. So make any stops you need, grab, there's cookies in the back.
And thank you, council. No
Thank you for the
easy,
direction.
no easy decisions.
We were in a ditch on this.
Karen, are we off?
Not yet.
Well, and these